子供たちが戦争で傷つけられるの私は絶対に許せない。三将騎士団団長ヘレナ参上いたしました。慈悲は何としても味方です。大事なものを守るために強くならなきゃ。我が剣で一族の幸せを守る。
Helena's basic utility is as a high damage striker because she has skills that hit for 1.6 times damage. In addition to this, however, she can also do 0.3 times or 0.4 times AoE damage to the enemies. And that's because she has a Petal Storm passive that does 0.1 times AoE damage, and you follow that up with her 3C AoE skill that also adds 0.2 times AoE damage. So she can do 2 Petal Storms because she has access to Chivalry. So Chivalry will do the first Petal Storm AoE, and then you follow up with, after your attack, you get to do another Petal Storm along with the 3C AoE for a total of either 0.3 times or 0.4 times, depending on whether you Chivalry next to the enemies or not. She can also ignore enemy unit obstructions, just like Ares, so blocking her path does absolutely nothing. And finally, she can either reduce the stats of enemies that she faces in PvE content, or disable equipment in PvP. Effectively though, it does more or less the same thing. Other noteworthy aspects about Helena is that she can apply a special terrain effect, which is called Crystal Radiance, in 2 different ways. First, every tile she moves through will get replaced by Crystal Radiance, and second, using her 3C, which has a 2 block AoE, will get the Crystal Radiance effect on those tiles. So Crystal Radiance has 2 effects. The first effect is that for her personally, she moves through Crystal Radiance tiles with 0 movement cost. So assuming she manages to survive, she can retreat very easily because all those tiles with Crystal Radiance, she can just move right through. The second effect is that enemy units that are on the Crystal Radiance tiles will get a random piece of equipment disabled. 2 other things that need to be mentioned about Helena is that, first of all, she has no ability to attack and retreat. If she is getting to move again after combat, for example, it will not allow her to move through those Crystal Radiance tiles for 0 movement costs. And second, Helena is cavalry class only, just like Leon, and so that doesn't make her exactly a great tank buster, just like Leon once again. Great damage dealer though. So in terms of upgrade materials, please refer to this chart here about all the materials she needs for upgrading. Not going to go into this in any great detail, just a reference sheet, if you will, for what kind of materials you need to gather for her to upgrade her fully. Let's talk about her talent now. So, Helena's talent is Crystal Knight. She is part of the Empire in Legion of Glory factions. The talent effects are that for every 1 block moved, her damage dealt is increased by 1, 2, 3, or 4%, up to a 5, 10, 15, or 20% damage increase. So, and when there are no allies within 2 blocks, she also gets a defense increase of 10, 15, 20, or 25%, depending on her star level. So what you can say about this is kind of similar to Leon, right? The more she moves, the higher amount of damage she deals. The soldiers benefit from this damage increase, and she gets higher defense when she's away from allies, so that she takes less damage. Second effect of the talent is that at the end of the action, all blocks she's moved through gain the Crystal Radiance effect that I previously mentioned. So if enemy units move onto those Crystal Radiance tiles, they get a random piece of equipment disabled, which lasts 2 turns. And if it's a unit that's not a player character, so as an AI unit, they get a random stat decrease by 25%, which lasts 1 turn. And finally, as previously mentioned, when moving, she ignores unit obstruction, and if she's moving through tiles with Crystal Radiance, movement is not consumed. Bond requirements for Helena. Okay. So the second bond is unlocked by winning 5 battles in arena while using Helena. The third bond is unlocked when you unlock her Royal Knight class. The fourth bond, the defense bond, requires Brenda for clearing Gate of Fate number 4, Old Nightmares, and her fifth bond requires Virash for Gate of Fate number 5, a show of fealty. Her maximum stats are, not too much needs to be said about max stats. In general, it's recommended to use her in Strike Master simply because it has more attack. Strike Master has 609 base attack as opposed to the Royal Knight having 578. So that's a 31 attack increase in Strike Master compared to Royal Knight. Very, very significant. So clearly, Strike Master is the class to go. Finally, her Soldier Boost is very offensively oriented, but it's not a maximized Soldier Boost. It provides 40% hit point increase, 35% attack increase, 15% defense increase, 10% magic defense increase. Right? Unlike the original characters that very frequently had 40, 40, 10, 10, she has a bit less attack, but it's not. I don't think it affects anyone that she would be trying to kill. Okay? It's enough for her to one-shot any non-tank character, basically. So let's talk about her most useful skills. Right? And these are the 4 skills you're most likely to run for PvP content. So the first 3 is usually her best skill combo, right? You're going to bring the Awakening skill, Crystal Blossom, which does 1.6 times AoE, 1.6 times single target damage. It will disable the enemy weapon and deal a AoE damage of 0.2 times to enemies within 2 blocks of her after combat. And of course, all those terrains also get a Crystal Radiance tile effect, which means effectively when she uses this skill, she's going to apply 2 debuffs on the enemy, right? One via the weapon disable of her 3C, and then a second random equipment disable debuff. If you're facing NPCs, the NPCs will instead deal 30% less damage. Okay. Chivalry, of course, is always a great skill to bring because you can move 3 more blocks and get buffed and be immune to all debuffs. So that's always pretty much a must-bring skill. And then the final skill, the 1-point skill that you bring, it's usually recommended to be Petal Storm. Petal Storm is like a passive where you do 0.1 times AoE damage to enemies within 1 ring of her. And it has a 25% chance to inflict a random equipment disable effect on the enemy. So the random equipment disable effect lasts 2 turns. Unlike the one from her 3C, it can be dispelled. Right? And if it hits a NPC, it's a random stat decrease of 25%. I also put a 4th skill in here as like an optional skill. And the 4th skill is very similar to 3C in a lot of ways. It does 1.6 times damage to a single target and applies an accessory equipment disable effect, which lasts 2 turns and can't be dispelled. So as opposed to the weapon disable, it disables the accessory. And of course, if you're fighting against NPC rather than facing against a player character, then it actually applies a damage taken increase of 30% on the enemy. Once again, lasts 2 turns, can't be dispelled. She has various other skills. I'm not really going to go into those. Like, for example, she can bring Ram as a 1-point skill instead of Petal Storm. She can bring Rout to stun enemies. She has a whole bunch of other attack skills. But overall, these 4 are the ones you're most likely to use for Helena. So let's move on. Soldiers. For her soldiers, Helena has access to 7 soldiers. Weirdly enough, of those 7, 2 of them are infantry. She has access to Highland Warriors and Guardian Infantry. So I listed both in the other soldiers section. Her other very useless soldier is the Guardian Cavalry Soldier. Right? They reduce the amount of damage you take when you're attacking, just like the Holy Pegasus, if I recall correctly. So another rather useless soldier. So those 3 are put in the other soldiers section. The 4 soldiers that you're likely to use for her would be Angels, Bone Dinos, Holy Pegasus, and Royal Cavalry. Okay. So let's start with Angels. So Angels would be her bread and butter soldier, kind of like Leon. They take reduced magic damage, and as long as the soldier hit points is above 50%, their attack and defense are both increased by 20%. So they have higher stats, and they take reduced magic damage. Just makes them very, very versatile for both PvP and PvE content. If you want a full offense soldier, like just pure offense, Bone Dinos are the soldier of choice, because as long as soldier hit points is above 80%, their attack is increased by 45%. So rather than just a 20% attack increase that the Angels have, you're getting a 45% attack increase. The third soldier choice, which I personally don't generally recommend, is the Holy Pegasus. Holy Pegasus have the effect where as long as soldier hit points is above 50%, before you attack, you have a 100% chance to decrease damage taken by half. Right? For an offensively oriented character like Helena, running soldiers that don't get any kind of attack boost is generally not recommended. They can be run in certain battles, but as I said, I don't feel they're really a recommended soldier for her. And the last soldier that she can run is Royal Cavalry. When soldier hit points is above 80%, damage taken is decreased by 45%. Once again, not really a recommended soldier for Helena. You might run Royal Cavalry for, let's say, if you're auto-battling against Aniki Adon, perhaps, and you want to use a cavalry soldier rather than a flyer soldier. And you have Royal Cavalry built, but you don't have Bone Dinos built. So it's a very rare situation. You might want to use the Royal Cavalry instead. But yeah, not really a recommended soldier for her either. But those are the 4 that she would be most likely to use. Next, let's talk about Helena's equipment. And I have it split into 4 different categories. So the first category is the PvP AoE category. The second category is for pure single target damage. The third category is for single target damage in PvE content. And then the final category is the poor man's build where you don't have that much gear choices just yet. Her best enchant is definitely Breeze, because the limitation of using Helena is the lack of mobility potentially. So getting +2 mobility, so you have 7 mobility plus Chivalry for a total of 10 mobility is by far the best choice. For the poor man's build though, I have listed temporarily as the Full Moon enchant rather than Breeze, simply because you may not have access to enough Breeze enchants in the early stages, while you'll likely have spare Full Moon enchants. And in the early stages of the game, the Full Moon plus 10% to all stats can be more of a benefit when you don't have max roll enchants on your gear yet. So let's start with PvP AoE. So in this category, what you're focused on is maximizing your AoE damage at the cost of some single target strike damage. To do so, you're going to choose a weapon that will give you more AoE effects rather than single target effects. So the weapon choices here would be Demon Slayer for the ability to dispel buffs on the enemy, Bloodsword Hunting, which can do fixed damage to the enemy, and Balanced Blade, which can increase your AoE radius. So all of these combo very well with the AoEs that Helena keeps launching via Petal Storm and via her 3C skill. The second option is to go for pure single target damage. So this option will have you maximize your attack value at the cost of those additional AoE effects. So rather than the weapons of the PvP build, you're going to choose a weapon that gives you maximum attack, which would be either the Steel Guardian or the Blue Star. You can also choose to bring the Frostrend, that is a third option as well. And the armor, helmet, and accessory remains the same for these first 2 builds, which is the Cloak of Defiance for the extra fixed damage hits, the Fury of Tyr for an increased 10% damage with your skills, and the Twilight Star for another fixed damage hit. The third set is a single target PvE build rather than PvP purposes. So in this kind of build, what you're going to run is the weapon can remain the same, Steel Guardian, Blue Star, or Frostrend. The armor, rather than the Cloak of Defiance, I would say it's probably better to run an Aeolus' Battle Armor or Blood and Magic Armor, and that's because while there's only a 30% chance of triggering it, it does give that 30% range damage or physical damage reduction. So these reductions combo very well with Helena's soldiers. For example, if you're going to run Royal Cavalry on Helena, she can get a 75% damage reduction against physical damage. If you're going to run Angels on Helena, comboed with the Aeoluses, she can get 75% damage reduction to magic damage. So it just combos very well with her soldier choices, especially since she's not really able to retreat into a tank's guard range. Her helmet for PvE content should probably be the Vampire Mask, because reducing enemy defense by 20% is a very big deal. Combos very well with Chivalry. Being able to reduce their defense gives you a much higher chance of one-shotting than I think Fury of Tyr does. And finally, the accessory can be a Slayer's Emblem or a Judge's Talisman, which I don't have shown here. It can even be the Winged Shin Guard of the Poor Man's build. Finally, the poor man's build is where you're basically just starting off. So for the poor man's build, I recommended the full moon enchant rather than the breeze enchant, because this way you can save up your breeze enchants for when you get your final sets of gear. The gear choices here are all gear that should be easy to get, that you would just need to use Epic Martial Spirits on. So you're going to bring the Last Knight, the Anasis armor, and the Wing Shin Guard. As for the helmet, I actually have listed the SR version of the Vampire Mask, which is the Horror Helm. Finally, Class Mastery Enchants. For Helena, the Class Mastery Enchants that are recommended would be the same as Leon, frankly. You would maximize attack in every slot, and then after that, have some skill to probably try to prevent getting 3 times by Omega, and then you just want bulk after that, so hit points or defense for those last slots. For an example of Helena in action, I'm going to refer to a video shared by Farlar Lovell, Master of the Tentacle. So if I go into his Heroic Moen section, he has a battle shared where he lost against Helena. Put simply, this battle can be summed up in this manner. You lose to Helena if you don't understand her. She's, just like many other heroes, kind of a surprise or unexpected hero. You have to not understand the way she works to really lose to her. And that applies to a lot of characters in this game. So he plays his usual super tanky setup with double tank, Ledin and Landius with 3 healers. In this case, it's Wyler, Liana, and Deedlit as the 3. So on the other side, we have Helena, Licorice, Zerida, Liana, and Landius. The initial turn is completely standard, just the usual setup and approach. Maneuvering everyone forward to seize terrain. Nothing new about any of this. So what we saw just now was the Crystal Knight, by moving forward, applied some terrain effects. And right from the start, she gets an act again, and she runs through Landius, activating Chivalry, doing some AoE via her Petal Storm, and single target strikes Deedlit and wipes her out. And then gets a bit more AoE damage from her 3C effect and terrain effects, followed by Petal Storm once again to do even more AoE damage. So we just saw her charge forward, ignore Landius' block, take out Deedlit before any of the characters were configured and ready to attack. In addition, there's been various disables. For example, Ledin's helm has been nullified, armor has been nullified, Landius' accessory and weapon have been nullified, and in the case of Liana, her armor was also nullified. So the nullifications, you can see, has reduced the stats of these heroes. Because, for example, Landius now has much less attack than he normally does, because his weapon and accessory have been both nullified. So if I just go back a little bit, so I'm just going to go back to here, we see that at this point, Landius has 1,330 attack. After the nullifications, actually, let's just go here. So after the nullifications, his attack has dropped to 1,261. And as for Ledin, right, it was 928 defense, 718 magic defense. Post nullification, 836 defense, 718 magic defense. So you can see the stat drop due to equipment nullifications. Alright. So Farlar moves Landius back and tries to activate Peace of Mind to block the path of Helena, but Helena has ignored unit obstruction, and so she just runs on the Crystal Radiance path using 0 movement to get back to safety. And at this point, Farlar just surrenders because he already lost 1 character, while Blue Snowfield has all 5. So this is 100% a loss to lack of knowledge about a hero, but that's how Apex Arena is. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this video useful to you. And on that note, Nitro out.